They don't have to say it out loud for you to know. You're not welcome. When two black siblings are denied entry into an exclusive airport lounge despite first-class tickets, what begins as subtle gatekeeping escalates into a quiet war of dignity, perception, and power. But when their mother walks in, calm, precise, and holding more authority than anyone in the room expected, the illusion of control begins to shatter. How far will one family go to reclaim their rightful space without losing themselves in the process? Before we jump in, drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from, and stick around, because tomorrow's story will change the way you see everything. Judy Crawford didn't like to be stared at, not because she was shy, far from it, but because there was something about the way certain people looked at her that curled under her skin like cold wind. It was the kind of look that started at her box braids, skimmed the collar of her pressed white shirt, paused at her law textbook sticking out the side of her tote bag, and landed on her face with a faint, skeptical squint. That look wasn't about seeing her, it was about calculating her. She felt it now, on her left cheek, and without turning she knew exactly who it was. A woman across the terminal, pale as marble and dressed in a tight-fitting navy blazer that tried too hard to look casual, had paused mid-stride. Her eyes narrowed for a half-second before she continued walking. That moment wasn't long enough to accuse, but just long enough to register. Judy didn't flinch. She simply adjusted the strap on her shoulder and turned her focus back to Eli, who was crouched by their carry-on bag, digging through his sketch pad like it held the key to the universe. "You good?" she asked. Eli looked up, one earbud still dangling from his hoodie. "Trying to find the one I did with the sax player. You know, the one on the subway platform?" Judy smiled. "The one with the rain puddles?" He nodded, curls bouncing as he flipped another page. "I think I left it at home." She reached down and ruffled his hair, knowing it annoyed him just enough to be funny. "You'll survive." "You brought half your portfolio." "I needed options," he muttered. They were opposites, always had been. Judy was the composed one, always prepared, always on time, always aware. Eli, on the other hand, lived with one foot off the ground. His brain swirled with melody and color, and half the time he forgot what day it was. But they made a good team, especially when the world didn't. Their mother had called it armor. "You two are each other's armor, Dan," Danielle had said once, after a parent-teacher night turned awkward at Judy's predominantly white middle school. "Out there, people will see what they want. In here, we know who we are." Judy still held on to those words. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket and checked the boarding pass. Gate D17, first class. Altura Airlines, departure in just under 2 hours. "Time to experience the perks," she said, nudging Eli. "You ready for the lounge?" His eyes lit up. "Like the one with the buffet and massage chairs?" She laughed. "That's the one." The United Skyward Lounge was tucked behind a minimalist glass wall, unmarked except for a frosted Altura Airlines logo that shimmered when the light hit just right. The entrance was flanked by tall silver planters filled with perfectly pruned greenery. It looked less like an airport and more like a luxury spa. A podium stood before the doors, staffed by a young man with neat waves and a badge that read, "Jonas." He smiled as they approached. "Good afternoon. Boarding passes, please." Judy handed hers over first. A quick scan. Green light. A small ding. "Thank you, Miss Crawford." Eli's pass followed. Another scan. Another green. "Welcome to the Skyward Lounge. Our food service is straight through the left corridor. Showers and nap pods are down the right hallway. Just check in at the desk." Judy nodded, already stepping forward. But then, like a thread being pulled tight across her shoulders, a voice cut through the air. "Jonas, what moment?" It was flat, cool, sharp as a pin. Judy stopped. Jonas straightened. "Yes, Miss Crane?" From around the corner emerged a woman whose posture seemed carved from granite. Her hair was pinned so tightly it might as well have been lacquered in place. A thin smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her blazer had 3 gold buttons and not a single wrinkle. "May I speak with you for a second?" Jonas looked at Judy, then back at Meredith Crane. "Sure." The two stepped aside, and though Meredith lowered her voice, Judy still caught enough. "Did you check the list for companion passes?" They both scanned green. "Just double-check, please. We've had issues before." Judy's jaw tensed. Jonas returned to the podium, eyes flickering uncertainly between Meredith and the Crawfords. "I'm sorry. Would you mind just confirming your booking? Sometimes the system glitches." Judy's voice was measured. "Is there a problem?" "No, not at all. Just a quick verification." She held up her phone again, the screen already open. "Booked through the Altura app. 2 first-class seats, non-refundable, booked 3 weeks ago, under Danielle Crawford." Jonas took a breath and nodded. "Right. Thank you." Judy didn't move. Meredith stepped forward now, hands clasped. "Miss Crawford, I apologize. We'd just like to ensure the lounge remains reserved for our premium guests." "I am a premium guest." Of course." Judy tilted her head slightly. "Then what exactly are you insuring?" A pause. Meredith smiled again, this time with the faintest tick in her jaw. "Enjoy your stay." Judy walked forward, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. Eli followed, quiet for once. Inside the lounge, everything looked exactly like the website photos. Sleek marble counters, glass panels with warm lighting, an espresso bar humming softly in the background. But the taste in Judy's mouth was already bitter. They found a booth near the windows. Eli sank into the plush leather and looked at her. That was weird. Judy leaned back, her voice low. "It wasn't weird. It was expected." He frowned. "You think she—" "I don't think. I know." Eli glanced toward the front entrance. "Do you think Mom's going to hear about this?" Judy took a slow sip of water from the crystal-clear glass beside her. "She'll hear," she said softly. "Not from them. From me." And outside, behind the frosted glass and marble walls, Meredith Crane returned to her post, smiling, silent, and satisfied. "For now." Meredith Crane adjusted her collar with one manicured finger. The blazer always itched when she got irritated, though she'd never admit it out loud. That wouldn't be professional, that wouldn't be Meredith Crane. She had built her career on a very simple principle. Control the optics, and you control the narrative. From the outside, the Skyward Lounge at Kennedy Skyport looked like a monument to luxury, but Meredith saw it differently. She saw it as her showroom, her kingdom, the place where refinement separated itself from chaos, and in her mind, chaos didn't always look messy. It sometimes looked like a pair of well-dressed young black travelers walking toward her lounge with a little too much confidence. She wasn't stupid. Of course, she didn't say that out loud. That would be discriminatory. Instead, she focused on technicalities, on glitches, on verifications, on policy. That was how she'd done it for 15 years. Make it seem polite. Make it seem professional. No one could ever say she raised her voice. But even as she returned to her desk, Meredith's eyes remained fixed on the siblings. They had settled into a booth by the windows, just far enough that she couldn't hear them, but close enough that she could watch. The girl, what was her name again? Judy, had a look about her. Not the angry kind that ranted. No, this one was worse. Calm. Controlled. Meredith had dealt with her kind before, the I know my rights type. She tapped her pen against the check-in monitor and called up the manifest, scrolled. There it was. Crawford, first class, Seoul, accompanied by Eli Crawford. She clicked on the fare. Paid in full. No miles, no upgrades. No buddy passes. Her stomach gave a small twist. She could say it was about security, say it was just a check. She could always say that. Jonas passed behind her carrying a tray of glasses and paused. "Need anything, Miss Crane?" She looked up and forced a pleasant tone. "No, thank you, Jonas. All is well." He hesitated. "About the guests." "What about them?" I thought maybe I overstepped. I didn't mean to make them feel." She smiled, quick and clipped. "You followed protocol, that's all that matters." Jonas nodded, but his mouth stayed in a tight line as he moved away. Meredith turned her eyes back to the terminal glass. The Crawfords hadn't moved. Inside the lounge, Judy was scrolling through her phone, her thumb barely touching the screen. She wasn't reading, not really. She just didn't want to look up and see Meredith staring again. Eli had finished his second blueberry muffin and was halfway through a sketch. "You're doing the ceiling?" Judy asked. "Yeah, the way the light bounces off that gold trim. It's weirdly dramatic for an airport lounge." "You're weirdly dramatic for a teenager." "I'm an artist." "Same thing." He smirked, but the tension hadn't fully lifted from his shoulders. "You don't have to act chill for me," she said, quieter now. "You felt it too." He put the pencil down. "I don't get it. Like, why let us in if she didn't want to? She wanted us to know she could have stopped us, that she still has the power. She really thought we didn't belong. He still does." Eli looked down at his drawing. The lines were sharper now, more angular. Judy took a deep breath and turned off her phone screen. "Mom's gonna go ballistic when she hears. Think she'll call them?" "She won't call." Judy shook her head. "She'll show up." The thought made Eli grin. Back at the front podium, Meredith noticed a new arrival. A man in a sleek gray suit, white hair, mid-50s, clearly wealthy. She straightened, smoothed her blazer again. "Welcome to Skyward Lounge," she said, all warmth now. "Boarding pass, please." The man didn't say much, just handed it over. Meredith scanned it. Green. "Of course. Right this way, Mr. Langston. Our hot towel service is just resuming if you'd like to freshen up." He nodded and walked past. Meredith glanced sideways. The Crawfords hadn't even noticed. They weren't causing trouble, they weren't being loud, they weren't filming or arguing or doing anything that might warrant a second look. "And I want to hear more." And still, something about their presence annoyed her. Jonas returned again, this time from the espresso counter, carrying a tray of lattes. He moved with a kind of nervous precision, glancing at her, then glancing away. "Jonas," she called. He paused mid-step. "Yes?" She nodded toward the siblings. "Keep an eye, just in case they need anything, or cause disruption." Jonas didn't answer for a beat. Of course. He turned and walked off, but Meredith could feel the hesitation. Let him hesitate. She had a responsibility. 15 minutes passed, then 20, then 40. Judy and Eli sat, quiet, reading, sketching, drinking water. They didn't leave a mess. They didn't make noise. They didn't cause disruption. But they stayed, and somehow their presence felt louder than it should have. When Meredith returned to her desk for the 5th time that hour, her hands trembled just slightly. She hated that. Her nerves always got jumpy when she felt misjudged, when someone looked at her like maybe she wasn't quite in charge after all. It wasn't that she didn't like people like the Crawfords. She just liked order, predictability, things that made sense. And something about Judy's confidence, about the way she'd stared her down at the podium, left Meredith feeling uncentered. She looked down at the roster again. Crawford, seat 1A and 1B, Seoul, VP account. The ticket hadn't been booked with a generic credit card. It had been booked through a corporate block. Meredith squinted. Altura Corporate Booking, Crawford. Danielle. The last name clicked a little too hard in her head. Danielle Crawford. She'd heard the name before. VP of Brand Experience, Corporate Affairs. Oversaw premium customer protocols. Meredith felt a cold sweat bloom under her collar. Her fingers moved to her phone. She didn't send a message. She didn't call. She just stared at the screen. And for the first time in years, Meredith Crane felt like maybe she was the one being watched. Judy didn't speak for a full 5 minutes. She sat in that booth like she was sculpted out of glass. Still reflective, breakable only if someone was stupid enough to try. Eli had started a new sketch, his pencil whispering against the page. The lounge, with its hushed tones and tasteful lighting, looked like something out of a glossy travel magazine, but all Judy felt was the echo of that voice. Jonas? One moment. There was nothing inherently cruel in the words. That was the worst part. It wasn't what Meredith Crane said. It was the tone she used, cool and sterile, like she was filing a complaint about spilled coffee instead of interfering with someone's dignity. Judy could still hear it playing back in her head. That faux cordial tone Meredith used to ask if they were premium guests, as if Judy hadn't handed over a full first-class boarding pass seconds earlier, as if green lights on the scanner didn't mean what they clearly meant. "Really?" she said suddenly, and he looked up. She kept her voice steady. "If I start crying, promise me you won't freak out." Ely blinked. "Are you going to?" "No." She leaned forward, elbows on the table, palms pressed together like she was praying. "But it's starting to sit, and once it sits, it gets heavy." He closed his sketchbook. "Judy." "I'm fine." She cut the words sharper than she meant to. I need to not carry this into Seoul. I don't want it hitching a ride on our trip. You want to leave it here?" She nodded. "Right here, right now." They sat in silence for a few more seconds. Then Eli reached over and nudged her water glass a little closer to her hand. "You can break one thing," he said, "just not your voice." It made her laugh, but it was soft and short, and it didn't reach her chest. At the front desk, Meredith Crane was on her second cup of green tea. She hated coffee, claimed it gave her headaches, but she liked the ritual of a hot drink, liked having something in her hands when she needed to avoid eye contact. She wasn't looking at the Crawfords anymore. She'd done her part. She'd verified the passes. She'd followed protocol. She'd even allowed them inside, hadn't she? That was what people like Judy Crawford never understood. They always assumed everything was about race, always scanning for disrespect. Meredith didn't dislike them. She simply enforced standards. Except the name on the corporate booking was still stuck in her head. Judy Crawford. Altura Airlines. The more she thought about it, the more uneasy she felt. Because that wasn't just any corporate name. That was someone who sat on calls with senior leadership. Someone who reviewed performance metrics. Someone who probably signed off on lounge training materials. Meredith told herself it didn't matter. She hadn't broken any rules, hadn't raised her voice, hadn't refused entry. But something in her couldn't settle. She opened her email and drafted a message. To James Patel, Regional Manager. Subject: Possible incident. She stared at the blank body of the message, then deleted it. No, not yet. Behind her, Jonas was restocking the bar. He worked methodically, placing the small fruit bowls with geometric precision. When Meredith wasn't looking, he glanced toward the booth by the window. Judy caught the glance. He looked away. Back in the booth, Judy checked the time. Still 45 minutes to boarding. She looked at Eli. "Let's walk." "When?" "Anywhere that isn't this table." They stood, gathering their things. Judy's bag over her shoulder, Eli's sketchpad tucked under his arm. They moved slowly toward the corridor on the right, where the spa chairs and nap pods were located. It was quieter there, more secluded. Judy's heels made soft clicks against the marble. Meredith's eyes tracked them again. She watched Judy walk with her chin up and shoulders relaxed, like she belonged to the architecture, like she wasn't rattled at all. It irritated her. Confidence was dangerous in people like that. It turned moments into stories, stories into complaints, complaints into performance reviews. She considered getting up, just to stroll, just to pass by. She didn't. Instead, she pressed a button on the desk and picked up the lounge intercom phone. "Security," she said flatly. "This is Meredith Crane at Skyward. No emergency, but I'd like you to be nearby, just in case." "Nearby?" "Yes." She paused. Visible. The voice on the other end didn't ask questions. When she hung up, she smoothed her skirt and took another sip of green tea. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Jonas freeze. He had heard every word. In the hallway near the nap pods, Eli stopped to admire a large abstract painting on the wall. Swirls of deep blue and gold with white lines intersecting like flight paths. "You think they actually paid someone for this?" Judy smiled. "It's probably a local artist. They rotate them every quarter." He raised an eyebrow. "You read the plaque, didn't you?" "Of course I did." They kept walking until they reached the end of the corridor. There was a small side alcove with a view of the tarmac. The sky outside was streaked with orange now, the sun beginning to dip. Judy leaned against the glass. Eli stood next to her, quiet. Neither of them spoke for a long while. Then she said, "You know what hurts?" He looked at her. It's not the way she looked at us, not the tone, not even the hesitation. It's that she thought she could get away with it. Eli nodded slowly. "She probably does, all the time, but not today." No. Their phones buzzed. Boarding in 30 minutes. And somewhere near the front of the lounge, 2 uniformed security officers entered through the back. Not urgent, not aggressive, just visible. Meredith Crane stood up from her desk and walked slowly toward the espresso bar. Her eyes drifted to the corridor. Let them see, let them feel watched. Let them remember who's in control. But what Meredith didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that across the city, Danielle Crawford was already en route. And she didn't do phone calls. She did face-to-face. Danielle Crawford hated surprises. She was halfway through reviewing an upcoming brand partnership with an international hotel chain when the text came through. A simple message from Judy. No emojis, no unnecessary punctuation, just a quiet line of concern tucked between lines of control. "Everything's fine, but something happened at the lounge. I'll explain later." Danielle read it 3 times, each word carving deeper into her attention span. "Everything's fine" was never just reassurance when it came from Judy. It was a cover, a tactical shield. And "something happened" was the kind of phrase that kept mothers wide awake at 2:00 a.m., even if nothing followed. Danielle didn't respond right away. She simply closed her laptop, stood from her glass desk in the Altura corporate office, and said to her assistant, "Call the garage. I need the car brought around. Now." In her world, influence wasn't about shouting, it was about arrival. Back at the Skyward Lounge, the air had shifted. Not in a dramatic, visible way, but something quiet was brewing under the marble floors and imported scent diffusers. A current, slow and certain, was winding its way through the room. Judy felt it before she saw it. On their walk back from the far end of the lounge, she noticed the subtle change first. A man in a Navy security uniform standing just inside the entryway, speaking into a walkie with the casual stiffness of someone who had nothing to do but was told to look like he might. Another guard, same uniform, loitering near the drink station, inspecting bottled waters like they were rare artifacts. Judy stopped walking. Eli did too. She looked at him. "You see it?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Yeah." They weren't there before. Nope, they're not doing anything. They don't have to. They resumed walking. Not rushed, not flustered, just aware. Meredith Crane watched from her usual perch behind the podium, but this time she wasn't pretending not to. Her eyes followed Judy and Eli with quiet satisfaction. She didn't want them removed. She wasn't reckless, but she wanted them tempered, watched. Judy knew this game. Knew it from years of navigating classrooms where she was always one of the only. Knew it from internships where her assertiveness was called abrasive, but her quiet was labeled disengaged. Knew it from grocery stores, from banks, from walking into a dressing room and being asked, "Are you sure you can afford that?" without a hint of irony. But this moment was different, because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't entirely sure whether to act or to wait, whether to call attention or keep moving. Eli broke the silence. "Want me to say something?" She gave a small shake of her head. "Not yet." They sat back down in their booths. Judy picked up her phone again. She opened the text she sent their mom and stared at it. No reply yet. Not that she expected one. Danielle Crawford didn't waste time on texts when something could be handled in person. At the front, Meredith walked slowly toward the coffee station where one of the guards stood. She leaned in, speaking low enough that only he could hear her. He nodded once. Jonas watched the exchange from behind the bar. His lips were pressed together, his hands shaking slightly as he poured espresso into a tiny white cup. He didn't like this, not one bit. He had grown up knowing people like Judy and Ellie. He had gone to school with them, shared dorms with them. He'd seen how quick people were to decide what blackness looked like when wrapped in wealth, and how even quicker they were to doubt it. Meredith returned to her podium. She adjusted her name badge, smoothed her hair. The performance was nearly complete. Except she didn't know who was on their way. Not yet. In the corner of the lounge, Judy noticed something. The security guard, the one by the drink station, kept glancing at her brother. Not both of them, just Eli. His eyes lingered a little too long on Eli's sweatshirt, a simple black hoodie with a music conservatory logo stitched near the chest. His eyes paused on the sketchbook, the way Eli's fingers drummed against it. And that was enough. Judy stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw her chair. She just stood. Eli looked up, confused. "What are you—" She turned toward the podium. The entire lounge didn't turn to watch. Just the people who always watched when they weren't supposed to. Those who noticed movement like prey notices rustling in the grass. Judy walked slowly, deliberately, her boots landing without hesitation on the marble. She reached the podium and stopped. Meredith looked up. "Yes?" Judy smiled. "I noticed you've added security to the lounge." Meredith kept her tone even. "That's standard." "Is it?" "Absolutely. We often rotate guards in the evening hours." "Interesting," Judy said, "because we were in the hallway for nearly half an hour and there was no one. They arrived right after we came back to our seats. I can assure you, Ms. Crawford, their presence has nothing to do with you." Judy tilted her head slightly. "That's funny." "Excuse me?" "Because if I didn't know better, I'd say you were hoping I'd cause a scene." Meredith's mouth twitched. "You're imagining things." Judy leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "And you're playing with fire." Meredith's smile returned, thinner now. "If you feel uncomfortable, you're welcome to file a complaint." "Oh, I will," Judy said, standing tall again. "But not here. Not with you. And not today." She turned and walked back to her booth. Eli looked at her as she sat down. "What did you say to her?" Judy answered with a breath, "Nothing I'd regret." 20 feet away, the guards stayed still. Meredith didn't blink. But the burn had started. Slow. Measured. Inevitable. Because Judy had only struck the match. The flame was still on its way. Danielle Crawford didn't like public displays of authority. She preferred boardrooms, well-lit strategy meetings, and perfectly worded emails that hit harder than a shout ever could. But when the moment called for it, she knew how to walk into a room and tilt the whole gravity of the space toward her. And that's exactly what she was preparing to do. The town car pulled into the terminal access road like it belonged there, because it did. Her driver didn't ask why she was headed to the Skyward Lounge unannounced. He didn't need to. Her eyes said enough. Inside the lounge, Judy could feel the shift. Not the aftermath of her confrontation with Meredith. That had simmered back into the usual silence. No, this was something else. Something just beneath the surface. Her pulse had steadied, but the burn in her chest hadn't faded. Eli leaned forward, resting his elbows on the edge of the table. "She's still watching us." Judy didn't have to look to know he meant Meredith. "She doesn't blink," he added, "like she's part snake." Judy smirked. "More like a chameleon. Blends into the background until she strikes." "Did you really mean it? That she's playing with fire?" "Oh, I meant it." Eli stared at her for a moment. "You think Mom's gonna show?" "I don't think," Judy said. "I know." Back at the front of the lounge, Meredith had returned to her computer. She kept her expression neutral, though a tiny, smug flame flickered beneath the surface. Judy's outburst, as subtle as it was, had proven her point. They were emotional, unstable, difficult. People like that always showed themselves in time. Her fingers hovered over the security access system. She wouldn't press anything, not yet, but she wanted the option ready, just in case. The guards remained planted near opposite corners of the room, their presence unannounced but unmistakable. Then, without warning, the frosted glass doors at the entrance slid open. Danielle Crawford stepped through. Her heels barely made a sound, but somehow the room heard them. Her suit was slate gray, tailored within an inch of perfection. Not flashy, intentional. Her pearl earrings caught the lounge lighting and flared just enough to announce her arrival without saying a word. Her ID badge, platinum-edged, clipped discreetly to her lapel, bore the Altura Airlines crest. But it wasn't the badge that made people straighten their posture. It was her eyes, calm, sharp, and scanning. Meredith lifted her head and froze mid-click. Jonas dropped a spoon behind the counter. Judy didn't look up right away, but she felt it in her spine. That pull, that magnetic shift in the room. Haley blinked. "No way." She turned. Danielle didn't rush. She walked the way generals inspect troops. Unbothered, unsmiling, but with absolute command. She passed the refreshment station, the seating booths, the designer-reading nook, and then her gaze locked with Judy's. No words exchanged. Judy stood. Eli stood with her. "Mom," Judy said. Danielle reached them and gave a single nod. "You good?" "We are now," Judy replied. Danielle turned her head slowly toward the front of the lounge. Her eyes landed on Meredith, who was already standing, arms folded so tightly it looked painful. Meredith's mouth parted, a dry smile forming. "Miss Crawford, what a surprise. We weren't informed you'd be visiting today." Danielle walked toward her, Judy and Eli trailing just a step behind. "I didn't need to be announced," she said simply. "I was told there was an incident." "Oh, I wouldn't call it an incident," Meredith said, voice pitched to perform. "More of a miscommunication." Danielle's brows lifted ever so slightly. "With my children." Meredith flinched, but barely. "I wasn't aware they were yours." "You didn't ask." A pause stretched out between them. Jonas stood frozen behind the counter. Even the security guards had stopped pretending to look busy. Danielle took one more step closer. "Walk me through it." Meredith straightened. They approached the entrance. I asked for standard verification. Nothing more. The system flagged their names for a quick check. Happens all the time. I was simply doing my job. Danielle nodded slowly. And then? Still with a smile. They were allowed in, no harm done. Danielle glanced at Judy. That true? Judy spoke clearly. She stopped us after we'd already been cleared, called Jonas off, made us re-verify, told us she needed to double-check for companion passes, then posted security when we came back from the restaurant. Meredith's eyes darted to the guards. That's a standard safety measure. They're teenagers carrying sketchbooks? Danielle asked. Or just for mine? There it was, the real question. Meredith hesitated. It had nothing to do with race. I didn't say it did. Danielle's voice was velvet and steel. But it's telling that you brought it up unprovoked. Meredith's mouth opened, then closed. Danielle turned toward Jonas. You were on desk duty when they arrived. Jonas nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Did their tickets scan green? Yes, ma'am. Were they booked under my corporate account? Yes, ma'am. Did they cause any disruptions? No, ma'am. Danielle turned back to Meredith. Well, Meredith's face had gone pale. I was only trying to ensure the integrity of the lounge experience. Danielle leaned in slightly. The integrity of the lounge doesn't hinge on who makes you uncomfortable. Silence fell like a curtain. Then Danielle said, You can call the regional director now, or I can. Meredith swallowed. That won't be necessary. Danielle gave one final nod, then turned to her children. Let's go. They followed her to the back corner of the lounge, where the seating was softer and more private. A small table, fresh flowers, chilled water already waiting. Judy sat, finally exhaling. Eli looked stunned. You just shut her down. Danielle smirked, soft but certain. No, I gave her a chance to explain. She failed. I knew you'd come, Judy said. Danielle met her daughter's eyes. Always. And behind them, Meredith Crane stood frozen by the podium. Her hands clenched, her pride cracked and her authority slipping quietly through her fingers. Danielle sat with her legs crossed, one ankle resting neatly on her knee. She sipped sparkling water like it was a routine part of reclaiming space, and for her it was. She didn't speak right away. Neither did Judy. The three Crawfords sat in that private alcove of the Skyward Lounge like a family posing for a photograph. Composed, firm, untouchable. But silence had never been a retreat for Danielle. It was a tactic. You want to tell me what really happened? She said finally, eyes still on the glass she held. Or you want to give me the version that'll keep my blood pressure stable? Eli looked at Judy. Judy looked at their mother. Then she gave a slow, measured exhale. He didn't want us here, Judy said, from the moment she saw us walk up. Jonas scanned our tickets, both green, no issue, but before we could even take 2 steps inside, she called him off. Danielle nodded. Christ. She asked to verify our booking, said something about companion passes, then stood there like she was waiting for us to confess something. Danielle's brow ticked upward. Companion passes. Yeah, Judy said. Like we didn't pay. Like someone slipped us in under the table. She didn't like the way we looked, Eli muttered, quieter than usual. Danielle turned her gaze toward him. And how do you think you looked? Eli shrugged. Like us. Exactly. They sat for another beat. Danielle set her glass down and folded her hands in her lap. Here's what I think, she said. I think some people are more offended by the sight of a black family in first class than they are by any actual disruption. I think Meredith Crane is used to her perception being treated as policy, and I think... She leaned slightly forward. She's been allowed to confuse professionalism with bias for far too long. Judy nodded slowly. So, now what? Now, Danielle said, we don't shrink. At the front of the lounge, the atmosphere had changed. Guests were whispering. A woman in a tailored dress near the wine station glanced repeatedly toward the back corner where the Crawfords sat. A man, scrolling his phone by the window, kept darting his eyes up, as if hoping to catch more. It wasn't that the confrontation had been loud. It was that it had been public. No shouting, no scandal, but there was something about the sight of a black woman in a slate suit putting a white lounge manager in check that made the room vibrate differently. Meredith stood by the podium, eyes forward, posture unchanged, but the confidence in her stance had thinned. Even her voice, when she greeted a new guest, sounded less sure. "Welcome to Skyward. May I scan your boarding pass?" The guest, an older man in a navy blazer, handed over his phone. Meredith scanned it. Green. "Enjoy your stay," she said, but her voice cracked just slightly on enjoy. She glanced toward the Crawfords. The mother had arrived like a force of nature. Nothing aggressive, nothing loud, just absolute certainty wrapped in calm. It unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Jonas approached from the side, carrying a tray of napkins and ginger tea. He paused at her station. "You all right?" he asked under his breath. Mara didn't look at him. "I'm fine." "They're not leaving," he said. "They have a flight to catch." Still, Meredith narrowed her eyes. "What's your point, Jonas?" He didn't answer, because the point was already made. Meredith turned back to her screen. Her reflection stared back in the gloss. She didn't like the look in her own eyes. Danielle, still seated with her children, reached for her phone. She tapped a few words into a note app, then locked the screen. "You documenting?" Judy asked. "I don't leave things to memory," Danielle said. "Paper trails matter." Eli leaned in. "Is she going to lose her job?" Danielle considered. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether this is the first time," she said, "or the 50th. Judy rubbed her palms against the fabric of her jeans. "It's not just about us, is it?" Danielle looked at her daughter, pride flickering like a second sun behind her eyes. "Of course not. It never is." Another guest walked into the lounge. A young white woman with a leather tote and oversized sunglasses. She barely glanced around before making her way to the front desk. "Boarding pass?" Meredith asked. The woman dug into her bag. I think I left it in my email. Can you just look me up?" Meredith hesitated. "I'm afraid we need to scan." "Oh, come on. I'm in seat 3A. My boyfriend upgraded us last minute." There was no green light, no confirmation, just a smile and a shrug. Meredith waved her in. Atkins. Danielle watched it happen. Quiet. Intent. Judy caught it too. That one didn't even have her pass pulled up. Danielle's face didn't change. "No," including. "You are just let her in." "Yep." Eli sighed. "That's wild." "No," Danielle corrected. "That's the problem." Judy sat up straighter. "Are you going to report her?" Danielle didn't blink. "I don't report people." Judy tilted her head. "You don't?" "Dismantle them," Danielle said. The three of them fell into silence. Not out of fear, out of knowing. The lounge continued buzzing quietly with background noise, coffee steaming, shoes clicking, occasional boarding announcements drifting in from the terminal. But the air somehow felt clearer. The Crawfords didn't whisper, didn't huddle, didn't hurry. They existed, visible, present, whole, and everyone saw them. Eyes on them now, not out of suspicion, but out of something else entirely. Recognition. The lounge lighting dimmed as the sun sank lower, casting long amber streaks across the marble floor. The voices of travelers murmured in a steady rhythm, polite and predictable, like background music you barely noticed, unless you were listening. Danielle Crawford's phone buzzed once against the table. She glanced at it. A text from her assistant. "Need confirmation on the Berlin call for tomorrow. Should I reschedule?" She tapped a quick reply. "Yes, push it by a day." It was the first meeting she'd willingly postponed in over a year, but there were priorities, and today her priorities had brown skin, sharp minds, and sat beside her in matching defiance. Eli had returned to his sketchbook, his pencil gliding calmly now, more fluid than before. Whatever knot had formed in his shoulders earlier seemed to have loosened since Danielle walked in. Judy, on the other hand, still wore the same expression, measured, alert, almost clinical. Danielle noticed. "You're still in it," she said softly. Judy blinked. "In what?" "Of the moment. You haven't stepped out of it yet." Judy leaned back in her chair, arms folded. "Because it hasn't ended." "It will." He shook. Danielle tilted her head. "You think I came here just to put on a show?" Judy's lips parted, but no words came. She looked at her mother, really looked at her, and realized this wasn't just about fixing something for her kids. This was personal. "Did this ever happen to you?" Judy asked. Danielle smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile people wore when recounting old wounds. "You think I became a VP because they handed it to me?" Judy didn't answer. "I had to prove I belonged in every room. Twice." Danielle's voice was calm, but it echoed with weight. "Once for being a woman, again for being black. You know how many lounges I've walked into where someone paused just long enough to ask for an extra ID?" Eli looked up from his sketchbook. "Every time?" Danielle nodded. "Just about." Judy tapped the side of her glass with one fingernail. "And you never said anything?" "Oh, I said plenty, but not to them, to the people who could actually do something about it." "That's what you're going to do now, isn't it?" Danielle glanced across the room, where Meredith Crane stood at the far end of the lounge, pretending to read a binder that hadn't been touched in months. "You already have." Back at the front desk, Meredith could feel it. The way people were watching her differently now, not openly, but sideways. Jonas hadn't said a word since Danielle's arrival, but the way he moved around her was different, more distant, more mechanical. Like he didn't want to be near the fallout. She'd tried to act unaffected, kept her shoulders back, kept her voice neutral, but her throat was dry, too dry. She poured herself a glass of water and tried to swallow. The regional director hadn't called yet, but she knew the email was coming. Probably already sent. Across the room, Danielle's phone buzzed again. She read the screen. "Noted. We'll flag for executive review. We'll follow up directly tomorrow morning." That was all she needed. "Okay," she said, rising from her seat. "Time for me to head back." Eli blinked. "Already?" Danielle smoothed her blazer. "My part's done." Judy stood too. "Thank you, Mom." Danielle stepped closer, brushing a braid behind her daughter's ear. "Don't thank me for doing what any parent should. You don't owe people grace just because they expect you to stay silent. You handled yourself." "I didn't feel like I did." "You did." Danielle turned to Eli. "You good?" He nodded, standing up too. "Thanks for coming." Danielle leaned in, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "Next time someone watches you too hard, let them. They might learn something." She turned, and as she walked past the front desk, Meredith looked up. Their eyes locked. Danielle didn't stop, didn't slow. But the look she gave said everything. It wasn't anger. It was dismissal. The worst kind. When Danielle exited through the frosted glass doors, the silence she left behind weighed heavier than any confrontation could have. Judy sat down again. She picked up her phone and opened a blank note. June 17th, 4:32 p.m. Altura Skyward Lounge, JF. Meredith Crane, manager. 2 guests flagged post-clearance. Security dispatched without cause. Pattern observed. Selective enforcement. She saved it without typing another word. Eli looked at her. You're making a report. No. What is it then? She stared at the screen. A receipt. The lounge had grown quieter, somehow, as if the building itself was digesting what had just happened. Jonas approached their table hesitantly. "Can I bring you anything?" he asked. "Tea, snacks?" Judy looked up. "No, thank you. I'm sorry," Jonas said. "For earlier, I knew something wasn't right." "You didn't say anything," Judy replied. "I know. I should have." She studied him for a moment. He looked genuinely uncomfortable, not performative. "I get it," she said. "You work here. You have to pick your battles. But that wasn't one I should have skipped." Eli gave a small nod. "Next time, speak up." Jonas nodded and turned to leave. As he walked away, Judy glanced toward the front desk. Meredith was gone. She must have retreated into the back offices, away from the stairs. Or maybe she just couldn't stand the sight of them still there. Still standing. Still unbothered. And together. Meredith Crane's office was small, tucked behind a hallway disguised to look like a staff-only corridor. The door bore no nameplate, just a sleek metallic finish and a discreet keypad. She sat behind her desk now, staring at her monitor, pretending to read emails while her stomach curled tighter with every tick of the clock. No one had officially reprimanded her yet, but the silence was worse. That kind of silence, the kind that comes after you've been seen, fully and without permission, was sharper than any formal warning. Meredith knew corporate, knew how they worked. When people like Danielle Crawford got involved, the consequences didn't come fast or loud. They came surgical, calculated. By the time you realized the walls were moving in, it was already too late. She picked up her phone, scrolled down to a contact labeled Hal Legal, hovered her thumb over the call button, then put it down. It was too early for damage control. She needed to see how far this would go. Outside her office, the lounge buzzed with the polite rhythm of luxury again. But something about the air had shifted. Jonas could feel it, even if no one said it out loud. There were fewer conversations near the Crawfords' table now. Less activity near their end of the lounge. No one had explicitly told the other guests to keep their distance. Didn't have to. Respect was contagious. Or maybe it was the fact that everyone had seen Danielle Crawford walk in like thunder behind her eyes and leave without raising her voice once. Judy glanced at the time. Their flight to Seoul was now boarding in just under 40 minutes. The energy around her had finally cooled, but the tension in her chest hadn't released all the way. She noticed something. A thin hairline crack in the glass wall between the lounge and the terminal corridor. Barely visible, running diagonally like a ghost. She stared at it. A fracture so small it didn't change the structure, but once it started, it always grew. "Still thinking about her?" Eli asked. She nodded. "I keep wondering how many people she's done that to." Eli looked down. "Probably a lot." "You gonna write it up for real?" "Mom already is," Judy said. "But I think I'll do one too, from the guest side." Eli paused. "Think it'll matter?" She looked at him. "Everything matters, even when it doesn't change anything immediately. It adds weight. Over time, weight cracks the ground." Eli smiled. "That's deep. It's the jet lag talking. You're not even on the plane yet." "Exactly." They laughed softly. Judy opened her email and started typing. Not a complaint, a record. Names, times, details. Objective language. She didn't rant. She documented. Across the room, a tall woman in a Navy Alturia uniform entered the lounge, clipboard in hand. She wasn't a lounge employee. Her badge read Corporate Liaison. Jonas spotted her immediately. He wiped his hands on a towel and moved toward her. "Can I help you?" She smiled politely. "I'm here to speak with Meredith Crane. She's in her office." "One moment." He knocked twice, paused, then opened the door. "Miss Crane," he said, trying not to let his voice carry, "you've got someone from corporate here to see you." Meredith stiffened. "Who?" "Didn't catch her name. She's got a clipboard." Clipboard. The cursed word. "Send her in," Meredith said, smoothing her blouse. The woman entered with a warm, professional smile, but her posture gave away the real message. She didn't sit, didn't offer pleasantries. "We've had some reports," she said plainly, "and I've been asked to do a standard review of this location's guest service interactions over the past 60 days. Meredith blinked. "That's standard now?" "Given recent feedback, yes." Feedback. The nice corporate word for "you messed up, and we're not going to let you know how badly until we're done gathering evidence." The liaison continued. "We'll need full access to guest entry logs, security check-ins, and any incident reports filed during that period." Meredith nodded stiffly. "Of course. And just to be transparent, this includes a performance review of all interactions flagged by internal oversight. Not a disciplinary measure," she added. "Yet," the "yet" landed like a pin dropping on glass. Meredith's jaw tightened. "Understood." The liaison turned to leave. Outside, Jonas was refilling the snack trays again, but this time his hands didn't shake. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't anxious either. Judy saw the woman with the clipboard exit Meredith's office. She didn't react, but she noticed. Another crack in the glass. Small, but growing. A boarding call rang through the speaker. "Altura Airlines Flight 276 to Seoul, now boarding at Gate D17. Judy stood and stretched her arms. Showtime. Eli followed suit. "You think this flight comes with less drama?" "Home can hope." They gathered their bags and walked toward the exit of the lounge. Jonas caught their movement and approached with something in his hand. A small, neatly wrapped box. "Hey," he said, stopping just short of them. "This is for you two. Lounge thank you gift. I picked the good chocolate." Judy raised an eyebrow. "Bribery?" Jonas smiled sheepishly. "Apology. You deserve better." She took the box. "Thanks, for real. I'll do better next time," he said. Eli gave him a quick fist bump. "Hold it down." As they left the lounge, walking through the glass doors that slid open like a sigh, Judy turned her head for one last look. The space was just as polished, just as quiet, but somehow it didn't look quite as untouchable anymore. It looked human, cracked maybe, but finally beginning to reflect something real. They walked to Gate D17 not with urgency, but with certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from being seen, from standing up, and from knowing that just maybe this time change had already begun. The walk from the lounge to Gate D17 wasn't long, but it felt symbolic. Eli noticed how no one gave them second glances anymore, at least not the kind that lingered with suspicion. There was something different in the air, like the moment had passed, but also like it had left a mark. Judy carried herself with that subtle shift too. She didn't walk faster, didn't try to fade into the crowd. She stayed present, like her body had absorbed the weight of what happened and decided to wear it with pride instead of shame. The gate area buzzed with the usual noise. People rustling through bags, a toddler melting down near the windows, a couple whisper arguing about who forgot the charger. But for Judy and Eli, it all just washed over them. Judy checked the departure board and saw the familiar green, on time. "I half expected it to be delayed," she muttered. Eli grinned. "Why? You think Meredith controls the weather now too?" "She might," Judy replied dryly. "Seems like the type to keep a finger on the clouds." They stood near the end of the first-class queue. The gate agent, a young woman in her late 20s with short curls and a deep maroon lipstick, smiled as they approached. "Boarding first class now," she said. "Crawford, right?" Judy blinked. "You remember us?" "I saw the note on the manifest. Welcome aboard." The agent's smile held just a whisper of understanding. Nothing obvious, nothing forced, just warmth. Judy gave a small nod of thanks and stepped through the scanner. The machine beeped once, clean and green. Eli followed, same result. As they walked through the jet bridge, Eli whispered, "That felt different." Station was different. No clipboards, no suspicion. "No, Meredith," Judy added. The inside of the aircraft was dim and quiet. Cabin lights glowed soft gold. A flight attendant with silver streaks in her bun greeted them. "Yes. Welcome aboard. Seats 1A and 1B, just to your left." The seats were wide and plush, with screens folded neatly into their consoles and blankets already waiting. Judy slipped into 1A and pulled her phone out of her coat pocket. No new messages, no calls. Eli slid into 1B, exhaled, then kicked off his sneakers. "This is more like it," he muttered. Judy chuckled. "You act like you haven't flown business before." "Not after being nearly detained in a lounge," he said. "Makes you appreciate it more." She didn't argue. Minutes passed. Then more passengers began to trickle in, mostly couples. A man in a blazer with his face buried in his phone. An older woman clutching a neck pillow like it was a family heirloom. Everything was falling back into rhythm. That was the strange thing about moments of tension. They stretched time, but afterward, everything sped back up like nothing had happened. The flight attendants offered champagne or orange juice. Judy declined. Eli took the juice. Then the doors shut. Judy looked out the window as the tarmac lights began to blur. "Do you ever think about how weird it is?" she asked. "What? How fast the world forgets. That whole scene back there. Most of those people have already moved on. It's like it never happened." Eli sipped his juice. "But we didn't forget." "No," Judy said. "We didn't." The plane taxied slowly, humming like a giant beast learning how to breathe. And then her phone buzzed. A new message from Danielle. Followed up with compliance and training. "Formal review of JFK Skyward Lounge begins Monday. Keep notes. Proud of you." Judy stared at it for a second, not because she was surprised, but because even after everything, it still meant something to be believed. She passed the phone to Eli. He read the message, eyebrows raising slightly. "She moves fast. She always has." Eli leaned back into his seat and pulled his blanket over his lap. "Think they'll fire her?" "Meredith?" Judy asked. He nodded. Judy hesitated. "I don't know. Firing doesn't undo the culture that allows someone like her to thrive." "So what does?" Judy thought about it. The weight of that question felt bigger than the moment, heavier than the plane around them. "Reckonings," she said finally. "Quiet ones. Public ones. All of them matter." The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard, predicting a smooth flight and thanking them for choosing Altura. It sounded routine, scripted, but oddly comforting. As the aircraft lifted off, Judy felt it not just the weight of gravity pulling them back, but the slow release of everything that had built up over the last few hours. She looked at Eli, already half asleep with his sketch pad resting on his lap. She looked back out the window. The runway lights slipped behind them like memories, small and fading. Somewhere far below, the lounge still glowed, pretending everything inside it was perfectly curated, perfectly clean. But glass remembers, even when polished, even when ignored. Judy rested her head back, closed her eyes, and let herself exhale. For the first time all day, it didn't feel like she was bracing for anything. The cabin was dark now, not pitch black, but low lit in that dreamy, cloud-high glow only long-haul flights seemed to capture. The stars outside the window looked like they were just out of reach, flickering like a secret code only the sky understood. Most of the passengers around Judy and Eli had slipped into a half-sleep, earbuds in, faces turned toward the windows or the in-flight entertainment. Eli had his hood pulled over his eyes, blanket tucked to his chin, headphones on. He wasn't asleep, but he was somewhere in between. Drifting. Judy wasn't. Not yet. She sat upright in her seat, a warm lemon-scented towel cooling in her palm, eyes on the screen in front of her even though it was paused. The little cursor blinked over a documentary title she hadn't committed to watching. Her mind had moved somewhere else. Not forward, not even backward, just deeper. It was the stillness that brought it up again. The quiet after the storm. The moment when you finally get a second to feel everything all at once. That wasn't just a confrontation. It was a collision between past and present, between perception and reality, between what people expected to see and what they actually saw when someone refused to shrink. Danielle's face came back to her then, unbothered, precise, patient like a surgeon in heels. That woman didn't walk in to make a scene. She walked in to reset the entire narrative. Judy thought about how rare that was. How rare it was for black women to be allowed to carry power without apology. And how Danielle had done it not just for herself but for her children. Her hand moved slowly to her lap, where her phone sat. She turned it on, opened Notes again, and added one more line to her earlier entry. Do not let this become a footnote. Across the aisle, a flight attendant quietly stepped through the cabin, checking on resting passengers, refilling water bottles without waking anyone. She approached Judy and gave her a soft smile. "Can I get you anything?" she whispered. Judy blinked out of her thoughts. "No, thank you." The attendant nodded. "If you change your mind, I'll be up for another hour." As she moved on, Judy turned toward Eli. "You awake?" He stirred slightly, lifted his hood halfway, mostly. She lowered her voice. "Do you feel like we won?" He opened one eye. "Won what?" "The whole thing. The lounge, Meredith, everything." Eli sat up more now, pushing the hood off. "I don't know if it was about winning." "Then what was it?" He rubbed his eyes. "Maybe it was about not letting them take something from us." "Like what?" "Belonging." Judy stared at him. Her little brother didn't say much, but when he did, it had weight. "That's it," she whispered. "That's exactly it." Because that was the part that stung the most. Not being questioned, not being watched, not even the security guards pretending not to guard them. It was being treated like they didn't belong. Like everything about them, skin, posture, presence, was a disruption in someone else's curated reality. And what they'd done, quietly, over the last few hours, was refuse to give that illusion power. "You hungry?" Judy asked. "Always," Eli replied without hesitation. She laughed, quiet but real. "I think they're serving breakfast in a couple hours." "Hope it's not another cold croissant. I'll trade you mine for extra jam." "Deal." Their voices lowered again, but the moment felt lighter. Judy reclined her seat a little, finally letting herself sink into the softness. Not because the chair was luxurious, but because for the first time since they walked into that lounge, her muscles weren't coiled. And then, like clockwork, her phone buzzed once. She picked it up. An email from Altura Airlines guest services. She clicked it open. Subject: feedback confirmation, lounge experience. Dear Miss Crawford, Thank you for sharing your experience with us regarding your recent visit to the Skyward Lounge at JFK Terminal 4. We take all concerns seriously and have forwarded your report to our Executive Service Review team. Your feedback will be used to inform our continued efforts toward equitable guest treatment. A follow-up report will be shared within 10 business days. Warm regards. Alicia Menon, Director of Guest Experience Operations. Judy exhaled. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't justice. But it was movement. And movement meant something. She showed the email to Eli. He read it, then nodded slowly. That's better than nothing. Better than silence, she said. The seatbelt sign flickered on. A soft ding echoed through the cabin. The pilot's voice followed a moment later. Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our descent into Incheon International Airport, please return to your seats and ensure your belts are fastened. Estimated time of arrival is 6:12 a.m. local time. Thank you again for flying Altura. Congratulations again for 10,268 national time. Judy glanced out the window. Darkness still hung across the sky, but in the distance she could see the faintest blue beginning to stretch across the clouds. The start of morning. The promise of something new. Eli packed away his headphones. Judy tucked her phone back into her pocket. They didn't need to say anything else. They were arriving as a different version of who they were when they boarded, not because of the destination, but because of what they'd carried, what they'd refused to carry, and what they'd reclaimed in between. As the plane began its gentle descent, Judy rested her hand on her knee, fingers tapping softly. Not from nerves. It did from resolve. Because no matter how high they flew, the ground would always try to pull them back down. But today, they had reminded the ground it didn't own them. The sun had barely risen when Judy and Eli stepped off the plane. The terminal in Seoul was quiet, wrapped in that early morning stillness that made even the loudest roll of luggage feel like a whisper. Everything was made of clean glass and silver light, different than JFK, softer somehow. No one looked twice at them here. They were just travelers, arriving like everyone else. Judy walked ahead, her stride confident but not rushed. Eli followed, rubbing sleep from his eyes with one hand and dragging his carry-on with the other. They didn't speak much as they passed through immigration, collected their bags, and emerged into the main terminal. Outside, a driver held a sign that read Crawford in thick black letters. Judy smiled when she saw it. The driver, a quiet man in a gray uniform, helped them into the sleek black car waiting by the curb. As the doors shut and the city began to bloom around them, Eli looked out the window, eyes wide. Everything's so clean here, he muttered. And quiet, Judy added. But like, in a peaceful way. Not like back home, where it feels like everything's waiting to snap. Eli nodded slowly. You think Mom's already in a meeting? Probably 3, Judy replied. She said she had a conference call with Europe before sunrise. He whistled. She doesn't sleep. Nope. That's how she runs circles around people who underestimate her. They shared a smile. It wasn't giddy, it was knowing, respectful. The drive into the city gave them time to breathe again. Really breathe. The kind that doesn't stop short in your chest. The kind that doesn't come with the fear of someone second-guessing your presence. By the time they reached the hotel, an elegant high-rise overlooking the river, their bodies had finally started to unclench. At check-in, the concierge greeted them with flawless English and zero hesitation. Welcome, Miss Crawford. We have you and your brother in a luxury suite. Breakfast has been arranged on the rooftop terrace. Will you be needing help with your bags? No, we've got it, Judy said. Thank you. The room was everything the photos promised. Floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek wooden floors, a bed that looked like a cloud stitched together with silk. But it was the view that made them pause. From the balcony, the entire city shimmered. The Han River curved like a ribbon beneath them. The rooftops caught the first light of morning like they were made to hold it. Eli leaned over the railing, wind brushing through his curls. "This is crazy." Judy leaned next to him. "It's more than that." "What is it then?" "It's errand. It's earned." They changed quickly, splashed cold water on their faces, and headed upstairs. The rooftop terrace was mostly empty, just a few early risers sipping coffee under pale umbrellas. A waiter showed them to their table with a view that stretched all the way to the horizon. Croissants, rice porridge, fresh-cut fruit, eggs. Judy took a sip of her coffee and exhaled. It was the first time since the lounge she felt her body let go entirely. Eli cut into his omelet. "Think they've emailed Mum yet?" "Themself, they had." "How do you know?" "She didn't text again. That means she's working the long game." "You think Meredith is still there?" Judy stirred her coffee slowly. "Maybe, but not for long." Eli looked up. "You feel bad for her?" Judy paused. "No. I feel bad for the people who've had to deal with her and never had anyone show up for them." There was silence again, but not the heavy kind, the thoughtful kind, the kind that made space instead of closing it. Their food arrived, fresh and beautiful, and for a moment they let themselves enjoy it, not as a reward, but as a continuation, because that was what it was. Not a triumph after a fight, but the life that came after choosing not to let someone take your dignity. When they finished eating, Judy stood and pulled her phone from her pocket. One new message, from Danielle. "You were incredible. You both were. Take in this trip. You've already done more than some adults twice your age. Love you." Judy showed it to Eli. He grinned. "She's a whole force, huh?" "Is where we get it from." They left the terrace together, light on their feet, sun warming their backs. Downstairs, the hotel lobby buzzed to life with other travelers, some arriving, some leaving, none of them aware of what Judy and Eli had left behind in that lounge. But that was the beauty of it. The moment didn't define them. They defined it. As they stepped outside and into the world, the doors slid open without resistance, no sideways glances, no clipped questions, no obstacles. Instrument, just motion. Forward. Back in New York, a memo had already begun circulating through Altura Airlines leadership inboxes. Subject: immediate review, JFK, Skyward Lounge Management, Conduct. Status: EURG exit, executive oversight required. Attached were timestamps, security logs, first-hand reports, guest feedback, even a flag note from Jonas detailing his observations, discreet but firm. Danielle had made sure every crack was documented, every pattern noted. Not for revenge, but for change. And it had already started. Judy didn't know every detail of what would happen next. She didn't need to. What she knew was this: she hadn't stayed quiet. She hadn't let them dismiss her. And her mother had walked through that door not to rescue her, but to remind everyone that they never needed rescuing in the first place. They'd come armed with truth, and they'd left with their heads high. As their car pulled up and the driver opened the door, Judy paused, holding it just a moment longer than needed. She turned to Eli. "You ready?" He smiled. "Always." And with that, they stepped into the city. Not just tourists, not just siblings, but proof. Proof that you can show up, be seen, be doubted, and still choose not to disappear. Proof that dignity wasn't given, it was claimed. And this time, no one could take it back.